Behind a snowy warehouse in Idaho, two gas company workers cornered a wounded dog. The German Shepherd could have run, but he stayed by a small company van. When retired Navy SEAL Roan Kessler heard the growl, he knew it was not rage. It was a warning. Under that van was a damaged data module someone wanted gone, and on that dog's collar was the first clue to a danger buried beneath the snow. Stay with Roan and Draft until the end, then tell us where you're watching from, and please like and subscribe to help us reach 5,000 subscribers and keep these stories coming. Roan Kessler lived where the road forgot to finish its sentence. His cabin sat on the edge of a small Idaho town, tucked beneath dark pines and ridgelines that carried snow like old men carried secrets. In winter, the wind came down from the high country with teeth in it. It worried at the roof seams, rattled the porch light, and dragged dry branches across the siding at night. Most people found the sound lonely. Roan found it honest. At 45, he had the kind of body that came from years of discipline rather than vanity. Tall, broad-shouldered, lean through the waist, strong without showing off. His face was clean-shaven, almost severe, with a square jaw, sharp cheekbones, and skin weathered pale by cold air and long workdays under a white sky. His dark brown hair was cut short, military neat, though he let it grow a little longer now than he once would have allowed. His eyes were gray-blue, the color of frozen river water under cloud. People in town knew him as the Generator Man. They knew his truck, a dented dark pickup with a toolbox bolted in the bed. They knew he could coax life back into a dead pump motor, a barn heater, a backup generator at a remote station. They knew he showed up on time, fixed what he said he would fix, took payment without small talk, and left before anyone could invite him inside for coffee. They knew less about the years before Idaho. Some knew he had been Navy. Fewer knew he had been a SEAL. Nobody knew the names that came to him at night when the wind struck the cabin roof in short, hard bursts, like distant signals arriving too late. Two men had not come home because an extraction order had crawled through the chain too slowly. That was the clean version. That was the version with no faces in it. Roan did not attend reunions. He did not answer old messages. He did not sit in rooms where men told stories that made grief sound noble. He preferred machines because machines did not ask whether you had forgiven yourself. A generator either turned over or it did not. A fuel line was either clogged or clear. A battery either held charge or failed. Human beings were less merciful. That Wednesday afternoon, Clear Basin Energy called him to the loading yard behind their regional supply warehouse. One of their backup generators had been stuttering during cold starts, and a storm was moving down from the north. The dispatcher sounded bored and tired, which Roan trusted more than cheerfulness. By 4 o'clock, snow was falling in thin gray sheets. The warehouse squatted at the edge of town, a wide metal building with sodium lamps, chain-link fencing, and stacks of pipe under blue tarps. The Clear Basin logo, a pale flame inside a circle, was painted on the side of the building and half covered by frost. Roan worked behind the warehouse with his collar up and his gloves blackened by oil. He wore an old olive tactical combat shirt beneath a canvas jacket, the fabric softened and faded at the cuffs. His combat pants were brown-green, worn at the knees, the cargo pockets sagging with tools. Snow gathered on his shoulders while he checked the starter, cleaned a connection, replaced a cracked lead, and got the generator to cough, complain, then settle into a steady growl. "Better than most people I know," he muttered to the machine. The generator did not take offense. He packed his tools as daylight drained from the yard. Beyond the warehouse, the mountains were already disappearing, swallowed by a sky the color of wet ash. Roan had one boot on the running board of his truck when he heard it. A low growl, not loud, not wild, not the kind of sound a dog made before lunging. This was controlled, buried deep in the chest, a warning held on a leash of its own. Roan stilled. The growl came again from behind a row of pallets stacked near the far loading bay. Then a man's voice followed, sharp and irritated. "Move it! Get him out from under there!" Another voice answered, "He keeps going back to the truck." Roan closed his toolbox without a sound. He walked toward the pallets, boots pressing dark prints into the fresh snow. The tarps snapped in the wind. A loose chain clinked against a gatepost, ticking like a nervous clock. Behind the last stack, the yard opened into a narrow service lane where a small, clear basin utility van sat crooked near the rear fence. Its back doors were shut, but one of them hadn't latched properly. The vehicle leaned a little, one tire half up, on a ridge of packed snow. Two men in clear basin uniforms stood near it. One was heavy through the middle, red-faced under a knit cap, holding a wrench too high for a man who claimed he was only shoeing an animal. The other was younger, narrow and jittery, with a looped catch-pole in his hands. Both had their eyes fixed on a German shepherd backed into the angle between the van and a stack of metal crates. The dog was male, large-framed, black and tan, built for strength but thinned by hard days. Snow clung to his coat. A dark saddle marking ran along his back like an old piece of armor. His left front leg trembled when he put weight on it. One ear stood straight. The other had a small tear along the edge, making it tilt just enough to be remembered. He had an open route to the fence. He did not take it. Instead, he stayed close to the rear of the van, body angled between the men and the vehicle's underside. His shoulders were raised, his teeth only partly visible. His dark muzzle pointed forward, but his eyes kept flicking down toward something beneath the van. Roan saw that before he saw anything else. A frightened dog wanted escape. This one was guarding. "Enough," Roan said. The older man swung around. "Warehouse property. Stay out of it." Roan kept walking. The younger one tightened his grip on the pole. "Dog's dangerous." The German shepherd's growl lowered, not at Roan, but at the wrench. Roan stopped 6 feet away. His voice stayed level. "Then put the tool down." The older man laughed once, short and ugly. "You animal control?" "No." "Then back off." From somewhere behind Roan, a woman said, "I already called 911. All three men turned. A delivery driver stood near the loading bay with one hand raised, phone recording. She was short, quick-eyed, in a navy delivery jacket over an orange hoodie, a mustard-yellow phone case bright against the snow. Her reddish-brown hair stuck out from beneath a dark beanie, and she had the expression of someone who regretted being present, but not enough to look away. "Tessa Wren," she said, mostly to her own camera. "Clear basin rear yard. 2 employees cornering a hurt dog. One has a wrench, one has a catch-pole. Man in the old jacket is telling them to stop, which feels like the first intelligent idea anybody's had in the last 5 minutes." The younger employee swore under his breath. The older one lowered the wrench an inch, then raised it again as the dog shifted. Roan's jaw tightened. He did not want this. He had spent years building a life where trouble passed him by if he kept his head down and his hands busy. He fixed engines, cashed checks, drove home, and let the world mismanage itself at a distance. But the dog did something then that hooked into him. The German shepherd glanced at Roan. Only once. Not pleading, not trusting, not grateful. It was a measured glance, brief and grave, as if the dog had taken inventory of him and decided he was either useful or not. Then the dog looked back at the van. Roan felt something old moves under his ribs. Not memory exactly, more like the shape of a command. "Hold." The older employee stepped forward. "Last warning." "You're not in a position to give warnings," Roan said. The man with the wrench looked toward Tessa and lunged, reaching for the phone. Tessa jerked back, boots slipping on packed snow. Roan moved. It was not dramatic. There was no heroic shout, no flying tackle, nothing anyone could turn into a clean poster. He caught the man's wrist, redirected the momentum, turned the elbow just enough, and pinned the arm behind him with practiced economy. The wrench dropped into the snow with a dull thud. The man barked in pain, more insulted than injured. "Stay still," Roan said. The younger employee took one look at Roan, one look at the phone, and ran. He bolted past the crates, slipped once, recovered, and vanished around the side of the warehouse. Tessa lowered her phone slightly. Well, that escalated into a workplace training video. The dog did not move. That worried Roan more than the fleeing man. Even with one threat gone and the other restrained, the German Shepherd stayed by the van, chest heaving, ears trained on the underside of the vehicle. His injured leg shook harder now. His coat was wet with melting snow. A strange industrial smell hung in the air, cold metal, rubber, chemical residue, and something bitter beneath it. Sirens approached from the road. Roan released the employee only when a patrol vehicle swung into the yard, tires crunching over ice. Deputy Laurel Haynes stepped out, one hand resting near her belt, the other raised in a calming gesture that included everyone and trusted no one. She was in her mid-40s, steady-faced, with brown hair pulled low beneath a winter cap and a sheriff's department jacket zipped to her chin. She had the kind of eyes that did not rush to belief. They moved from Roan to the employee, to Tessa, to the wrench in the snow, to the dog, to the van. "Kessler," she said. "Deputy. That your dog?" "No." "Your fight?" "No." Her eyes narrowed. "Looks like you borrowed it." Tessa stepped forward. "I called it in. I have video. The guy went for my phone. The dog never came at anyone. He keeps guarding the van." The Clear Basin employee started talking fast. "This is company property. That animal was interfering with equipment. We were trying to remove it before somebody got hurt." Laurel looked at the wrench. "With that?" The man's mouth shut. Another patrol unit was still minutes out. Laurel had Tessa send the video. She radioed in the fleeing employee's description. She asked warehouse security for camera access. All the while, the German Shepherd remained where he was, shaking but fixed, a sentinel at the edge of collapse. Roan crouched slowly, not close enough to crowd him. The dog's eyes cut to him. "Easy," Roan said. The word felt strange in his mouth. He had said it to machines, horses at ranches, once to a burned-out veteran outside a gas station. He had not said it like this in a long time, low, and meant to be believed. The dog did not come. Instead, he turned, limped to the rear of the van, and began scraping at a metal panel beneath the chassis. Once, twice, again. His claws struck the panel with frantic precision. Not panic, signal, Laurel noticed. "What's he doing?" Roan stood and moved closer. The dog gave him room, barely. That small permission felt heavier than it should have. Roan lay on one side in the snow and shone his flashlight under the van. A rectangular panel had been fixed beneath the frame, too cleanly placed to belong there, its edges smeared with road slush. 2 screws were half stripped, as if someone had fastened it quickly. "Tool," he said. Tessa, without being asked, handed him a multi-bit driver from her delivery pouch. "Don't judge. My van's older than my bad decisions." Roan almost smiled. He removed the screws and lowered the panel. Something small dropped into his gloved hand. It was a module about the size of a cigarette pack, black, battered, and cold as a stone. The Clear Basin Flame logo was stamped faintly on one side. The serial number had been scraped nearly smooth. Along the edge, a port had been damaged. A few short black and tan hairs clung to the casing, frozen into a smear of chemical grime. Laurel's expression changed, not dramatically, just enough. "What is it?" Tessa asked. Roan turned the module under the flashlight. "Not part of the van." The German Shepherd eased himself down in the snow beside the device. Only then did he stop growling. The yard seemed to quiet around him. The wind still moved. The generator still rumbled behind the warehouse. The patrol radio muttered. But for a few seconds, Roan heard none of it clearly. The dog sat with his injured leg lifted, breathing hard, eyes fixed on Roan. There was no wagging tail, no soft gratitude, no storybook rescue unfolding under golden light. Just a wounded animal, wet with snow, guarding a piece of damaged equipment as if he had carried it across some private battlefield and finally found someone stubborn enough to look down. Roan knew better than to name that feeling. Naming things made them stay. Laurel took a careful step nearer. Animal clinics closed until morning. I can call County Hold, but with this storm, they'll be slow. And if this is connected to Clear Basin, I don't want him handed to anyone who answers their phone first. Roan looked at her. No? I didn't ask yet. You were about to. I was about to ask whether you can keep him contained overnight. No? The dog shifted. Not much, just enough for his shoulder to touch Roan's leg. It was a light lean, almost accidental, a tired body borrowing balance, but Roan felt the weight of it through his pants and into the bone. The dog did not look up. He simply stayed there, as if the decision had already been made by a court older than law, older than grief, older than a man's wish to remain untouched. Roan stared down at him. Every rescued thing became a promise. He knew that. A warm room became a promise. Food became a promise. A name became a promise. Keeping watch over something injured meant accepting the possibility that it might look back at you and expect you to still be there in the morning. Roan had failed men who expected morning. At least that was the sentence he had carved into himself day after day until it felt like truth. The German shepherd leaned a fraction more. Tessa wisely said nothing. Laurel waited. Snow gathered on the dog's torn ear. He blinked once, slow and exhausted, but did not move away. Roan exhaled through his nose. One night, he said. Laurel nodded as if she had not just watched a mountain crack open by the width of a paw print. One night. Roan bent and picked up the damaged module. Laurel bagged it as evidence. Tessa kept recording until Laurel told her she had enough, then lowered the phone and wiped snow from the cracked yellow case with her sleeve. The Clear Basin employee sat silent now, no longer angry, only pale. Roan opened the passenger door of his truck. The German shepherd stared at the cab, then at Roan, distrust and exhaustion wrestling in his eyes. Finally, with careful pain, he stepped forward. Roan did not lift him. Not yet. Some creatures needed help. Others needed the dignity of being allowed to try first. When the dog's injured leg faltered, Roan placed one hand beneath his chest and guided him up. The German shepherd allowed it with grim reluctance, as though accepting assistance from a disappointing but potentially useful subordinate. Tessa watched from the snow. He looks like he's already judging your driving. He can walk, Roan said. He can judge. For the second time that day, something like a smile almost reached his face. Then he shut the door gently, walked around to the driver's side, and looked once at the warehouse yard. The bent light poles, the tire tracks, the wrench half buried in snow, the van with its hidden compartment exposed. The mountain wind swept through the loading lane, carrying away footprints at the edges. But not all of them. Some marks stayed long enough to be followed. Morning came without warmth. The storm had passed some time before dawn, leaving the Idaho hills under a clean white silence that looked almost innocent. Snow balanced along the porch rail of Roan Kessler's cabin. Pine branches sagged under the weight of it. The old truck waited in the yard with frost on the windshield and one German shepherd asleep in the passenger footwell as if he had been assigned there by a higher authority. Roan stood in the open doorway with a mug of coffee in one hand and his jacket half zipped. The dog had not slept much. Neither had he. All night the animal had woken at sounds too small for a man to respect. The tick of cooling stovepipe, a branch shifting against the roof, wind threading itself through the corners of the cabin. Each time the German shepherd lifted his head, ears pricked, body ready despite the injured front leg. He did not whine. He did not pace in panic. He simply listened like a guard posted at the last gate of a fallen city. Roan understood the posture too well. He had spent years pretending he was no longer on watch. His body had never believed him. Now, in the gray morning, the dog sat upright in the truck, eyes fixed on the tree line beyond the driveway. His torn left ear gave him a slightly lopsided dignity, as if life had tried to mark him as damaged and had accidentally made him memorable. "We're going to the vet," Roan said. The dog did not look at him. Not negotiable. Still nothing. Roan took a sip of coffee. Good talk. The drive into town was slow. The roads were plowed in two narrow strips, with ridges of dirty snow piled along the shoulders. Roan kept one hand on the wheel, the other near the heater controls. The German Shepherd refused the seat at first, choosing the footwell like a soldier refusing comfort on principle. After 10 minutes, exhaustion won. He lifted his head onto the edge of the seat, eyes half closed, still watching the road. Roan did not turn on the radio. He had learned that silence could be safer than voices, so long as it did not start asking questions. Dr. Eliza North's clinic sat between a feed store and a closed barber shop, a low brick building with a blue-gray awning and paw prints painted on the glass door. Someone had shoveled the walk early. A wooden sign near the entrance read, "North Valley Animal Care," though the valley itself seemed to have appointed the place as a small temple for every limping, shivering, badly loved creature within 50 miles. Eliza opened the door before Roan could knock. She was in her early 50s, narrow through the shoulders, with gray blonde hair tied low, and a pair of reading glasses hanging from a cord around her neck. Her white coat was not truly white anymore. It held the faint history of iodine, fur, coffee, and long days. She had the calm expression of a woman who had been bitten, scratched, lied to, and thanked by every species in the county. Her eyes moved first to the dog, then to Roan. "Morning," she said. "Deputy Haynes called." "Figured she might. She said you had a German Shepherd with an injured leg, a strange collar, and a personality problem." Roan glanced at the dog. "That could describe either of us." Eliza's mouth twitched. "Bring him in." The German Shepherd hesitated at the clinic door. The smell inside was a kingdom of antiseptic, old towels, anxious cats, wet fur, and metal instruments. He lowered his head, nostrils moving. His muscles tightened, not with fear exactly, but with calculation. Clinics meant hands. Hands meant restraint. Restraint meant surrender. Roan crouched beside him on the snowy walkway. "No one's cornering you," he said. The dog looked at him for the first time that morning, not softly, not with trust, but with attention. Eliza waited without rushing them. That alone told Roan she knew what she was doing. After a long moment, the dog stepped inside. The exam room was warm, too warm by Roan's standards. The German Shepherd stood on the rubber mat while Eliza moved around him with quiet efficiency. She did not coo. She did not crowd. She let him smell the back of her hand, then his own chart, then the stethoscope, as if including him in the legal proceedings. "Well," she said, touching the side of his neck with careful fingers, "you have seen some foolish humans, haven't you?" The dog remained still. Roan leaned against the wall, arms folded. "He was behind the Clear Basin warehouse." "So I heard." "You hear everything?" "In this town? Eventually?" Eliza lifted the dog's front left paw. He stiffened, but did not pull away. "Heavy sprain. Maybe strain up through the shoulder. Not fresh from 10 minutes ago. He's been moving on it too long." Roan said nothing. Eliza parted the fur around the neck. "Pressure marks here. Older rubbing. Some hair loss. This collar was worn too tight or too long. Maybe both." The collar looked worse under the clinic lights. It was black-gray, industrial, broader than a normal collar, with a scratched metal plate on one side and a small data port that had been pried open. One edge bore the faint outline of where another component had once locked into place. Eliza tapped it lightly. "This isn't a pet tracker." No. Did you put it on him? Roan's eyes narrowed. No. I had to ask. That your bedside manner? That was me being gentle. She reached for a scanner. Let's see whether somebody bothered to admit he existed. The microchip scanner gave 2 dead passes before chirping on the 3rd. Eliza looked down at the small screen. The room seemed to tighten around the beep. She read the number, typed it into the clinic computer, waited, then frowned. Roan watched her face. He had never liked waiting beside people who were reading screens. Screens made men into subjects, reports, summaries, casualties reduced to lines. Eliza adjusted her glasses. What? Roan asked. He's registered. To who? Clear Basin Energy. She clicked again. Canine Odorant Detection Support Unit. Male, German Shepherd. Approximate age 6. Field name. She paused. Draft. The dog's ears shifted at the sound. Roan looked at him. Draft, Eliza repeated, softer. The German Shepherd did not wag his tail. He did not brighten like a lost pet, hearing the voice of home. But something in his posture changed by a thread. Recognition, maybe, or the old ache of being called by a name that had not protected him. Roan felt foolish for the tiny disappointment that moved through him. He had spent the drive pretending he did not care what the dog was called. Yet when the name appeared from a database instead of from him, it felt like finding a door already marked. Draft, Roan said, testing it. The dog turned his head slowly and gave him a look of grave, exhausted tolerance. Eliza noticed. He accepts your pronunciation, generous of him. He looks offended. He looks like he's been offended for 6 months. Roan almost smiled. Almost. Eliza continued reading. Status, retired due to task completion. Date logged 6 months ago. That mean adopted out? It should mean a formal retirement process, medical clearance, transfer paperwork, new handler or approved placement. Her voice cooled, but I'm not seeing any of that. The clinic heater clicked on. Warm air whispered through the vent. Roan looked at Draft's injured leg, the worn fur at his neck, the damaged collar. Retired due to task completion. It was a clean phrase, a polished phrase, the kind men used when they wanted to bury an ugly thing without getting dirt under their nails. What did he detect? Roan asked. Eliza leaned back. Not gas directly, if that's what you're thinking. Natural gas is mostly odorless before treatment. Companies add odorant, usually sulfur-like compounds, so humans can smell leaks. Dogs can be trained to pick up those odorant traces at low levels, especially in difficult terrain. Roan looked at Draft. So he wasn't magic. No, just better than people at admitting something smells wrong. The line landed harder than Eliza intended, or maybe exactly as hard as she intended. She removed the collar only after wrapping a towel loosely around Draft's shoulders to steady him. He tolerated the work with clenched patience. When the collar came free, the fur beneath it lay flattened and thin, the skin irritated in old bands. No fresh injury, but enough history to make the room feel smaller. Eliza placed the collar on the metal table. Draft immediately stepped forward. Not far, just 1 step. His nose lowered toward the collar, his ears angled back. His body changed from patient to alert with the speed of a lamp being switched on. He touched the damaged port with his nose, then looked toward Roan, not pleading, reporting. Roan remembered the module found under the van, the scraped serial number, the frozen dog hair on the casing. Eliza, he said, the part we found last night. Could it have come from that? She studied the collar again. Possibly. I'd need someone who knows the equipment. But see this rail. Something used to seat here. A data logger, maybe? Field module. The kind of thing that records location, timestamps, sensor pairing, handler notes. Depends on how advanced their system was. Roan stared at the empty rail. A missing piece, a dog guarding a van, men trying to drive him away, a company record declaring him neatly retired. Eliza's clinic suddenly felt less like a place of healing and more like the first room in a house with too many locked doors. Roan took out his phone and saw 2 missed calls from Deputy Laurel Haynes. He also saw below them the same old voicemail notification he had ignored for months. Caleb Rourke. The name sat there like a match unstruck. He turned the phone face down. Eliza saw the motion but did not comment. That was one of her gifts. She knew when not to press on a bruise. She gave Draft a mild pain medication, wrapped the leg for support, and wrote instructions on a yellow sheet in firm block letters. Rest, no running, short leash only, warm, dry place. Follow-up in 48 hours. She handed the paper to Roan as if he were a man capable of obeying written directions. He took it with suspicion. "I'm not keeping him," he said. Eliza lifted one eyebrow. "I didn't ask." "You were about to." "No, I was about to say he needs a stable place tonight, and county holding is full, understaffed, and smells like bleach and panic. But since you brought up not keeping him, we can admire your emotional clarity together." Roan folded the paper once. "Deputy Haynes can handle the company side." "I'm sure she can." "I'll give her the collar." "You should give her photographs of the collar. The original may be needed, but he may also need it for identification until we know more." Eliza touched the scratched plate. "And before you decide this is none of your concern, consider one small inconvenience." Roan waited. Eliza looked at Draft, then back at him. "This dog appears to have done his job. He marked something, protected something, stayed with it, even injured. The question is whether the humans around him are going to do theirs." The sentence did not raise its voice. It did not need to. Roan looked away first. Outside, a truck passed on the road, tires hissing through slush. Draft's head snapped toward the sound. His body braced. For 1 second, he was no longer in a clinic, but back in a yard full of uniforms, metal, and men who wanted him gone. Roan moved before thinking. He stepped between Draft and the window. The dog looked up at him. Roan realized what he had done only after the room settled. Eliza said nothing. That silence was worse than a lecture. By noon, Roan had called Laurel back. He gave her Eliza's findings without extra theory. Registered to Clear Basin. Odorant Detection Unit. Retired on paper 6 months ago. Damaged technical collar. Possible missing data module. Injured leg consistent with too much movement on hard surfaces. Laurel listened, asked 3 precise questions, and told him not to hand the dog or collar to anyone from Clear Basin. "I wasn't planning to," Roan said. "You also weren't planning to keep him overnight." "That's different." "Is it?" He ended the call before she could sound amused. Draft rode back to the cabin with his bandaged leg stretched awkwardly in the passenger footwell and his head resting against the seat. Roan stopped once at the feed store for dog food, a plain leash, and a bed the clerk insisted was orthopedic. Roan looked at the thick padded bed with distrust. "He's not royalty." The clerk, a teenager's grandmother, by the look of her silver braid and merciless eyes, stared over the register. "He's a German shepherd. He disagrees." Draft, from the truck outside, watched through the glass like an inspector evaluating procurement. Roan bought the bed. At the cabin, he placed it near the stove. Draft sniffed it, gave Roan a long look, and went to sit by the front door. "Of course," Roan said. He poured kibble into a metal bowl. Draft ate slowly at first, then faster, stopping twice to look over his shoulder. Roan pretended not to notice the habit. Some hungers were ashamed of themselves. Some fears did not know the meal was allowed to continue. The day sank toward evening. Snow slid from the roof in soft thuds. Roan cleaned his tools, made coffee he did not need, and set Eliza's yellow instruction sheet on the table where it looked strangely official among wrenches, invoices, and a chipped mug. Draft remained at the door. He sat upright, facing the dark window, ears tuned to the road below. Every now and then he shifted weight off the injured leg. He looked exhausted and stubborn and faintly ridiculous with the fresh wrap around his paw. Roan stood in the kitchen doorway. "I didn't hire security." Draft turned his head. The expression was so stern, so unimpressed, that Roan could almost hear the answer. Somebody had to. A laugh escaped him. It was barely a sound, more breath than voice. It surprised him enough that he looked around the cabin as if someone else had made it. Draft blinked slowly. "Don't get used to that," Roan said. The dog faced the door again. But later, after the stove had burned down to a red glow and the wind pressed its long hands against the cabin walls, Draft rose. He limped to the new bed, circled it once, and lay down with a deep, reluctant sigh, as if accepting poor accommodations from a junior officer. Roan sat at the table with his phone in his hand. The old voicemail waited. Caleb Rourke. The name brought with it a roomful of things Roan had kept locked away. Desert dust, radio static, the weight of a delayed order, two men whose voices had become sharper in memory, because memory had nothing new to soften them with. Caleb had called many times over the years, never demanding, never accusing. Just leaving short messages like small lamps along a road Roan refused to walk. Roan touched the screen. The voicemail opened, but he did not press play. Draft lifted his head from the bed. For a moment, man and dog watched each other across the cabin. One had been retired by a company record that did not match his body. The other had retired himself from the living world because a mission report did not match his grief. Both had been named, filed, and set aside by systems that preferred clean endings. Roan locked the phone. He did not listen, but he did not delete it either. Outside, the wind dragged snow across the porch in pale ribbons. Inside, Draft lowered his head, still facing the door, but no longer sitting guard on aching legs. Roan turned off the lamp. For the first time in years, the cabin held more than one breathing creature through the night. And the silence, though still heavy, was no longer empty. Deputy Laurel Haynes did not believe in beautiful stories. She believed in tire tracks, timestamps, witness statements, chain of custody, and the dull little details that survived when people stopped performing for one another. A beautiful story could make a room cry. A clean report could make a judge listen. Laurel had spent enough years in a small Idaho county to know the difference. So when Roan Kessler told her that Draft's chip tied him to Clear Basin Energy and that Dr. Eliza North believed the dog's damaged collar might have once held the module found beneath the company van, Laurel did not lean back and declare the mountain full of corruption. She said, "We need someone who knows the system." Roan stood outside the clinic with Draft beside him, the German shepherd's wrapped front leg lifted slightly from the snow. Eliza knew enough. Eliza knew the animal side. We need equipment, field procedure, and what those records are supposed to look like. "You have somebody?" Laurel looked toward the road, where plows had left gray ridges along the curb. "Maybe, if he opens the door." That was how they ended up driving east of town, past the feed store, past the last clean sidewalk, toward the old mining settlement locals still called Rafter Hollow, even though the mine had closed before Roan ever came to Idaho. Laurel led the way in her patrol vehicle. Roan followed in his truck with Draft in the passenger footwell because the dog had again refused the seat, as if upholstery were a moral weakness. The mountains rose around them, white-backed and watchful. Fences disappeared into drifts. A few cattle stood in fields like dark punctuation marks in an unfinished letter. The house at the edge of Rafter Hollow looked less built than accumulated. It was a low, weather-beaten place with a tin roof, a crooked chimney, and a yard crowded with objects that had escaped other men's patience. Sections of pipe, pressure gauges, rusted valve wheels, cracked plastic meter housings, copper fittings sorted into coffee cans, and one yellow warning sign that read, "Call before you dig," now leaning against a snowbank as if exhausted by its own advice. Draft lifted his head before Roan shut off the engine. His nose moved, not frantic, not afraid, interested. Laurel stepped out first and tugged her cap lower against the wind. Roan followed, one hand resting lightly on Draft's leash. The German shepherd climbed down carefully, favoring the wrapped leg, then stood very still, reading the yard through scent the way old priests might read smoke. The front door opened before Laurel knocked. Harlan Voss filled the doorway in a flannel shirt, a stained work jacket, and suspicion. He was not tall, but he had the compact stubbornness of a fence post driven deep. His silver hair stuck out from under a faded clear basin cap whose logo had nearly vanished. Several days of gray stubble covered his jaw. His eyes were pale blue and sharp enough to cut through excuses. "Deputy," he said. "Harlan? You bring me a warrant or a problem?" "Problem?" His gaze slid to Roan. "That the SEAL who fixes generators and avoids everybody?" Roan gave him nothing. "That the retired pipe man who keeps a junkyard on purpose?" For half a second, Laurel looked as if she regretted every career decision that had brought her between them. Then Harlan snorted. "Might be." Draft made a low sound, not a growl exactly, more like recognition pressed through a closed throat. Harlan looked down. The old technician's face changed. Only a little, but enough for Roan to see the man behind the gate. The irritation fell away first, then the practiced distrust. What remained was a kind of startled grief, quickly covered but not quickly enough. "Well," Harlan said, quieter, "I'll be damned." Laurel did not move. "You know this dog?" "I know what he was." "That's why we're here." Harlan stepped back. "Don't let him near the west shed. Got antifreeze and old solvents in there. And wipe your boots. I'm not heating the entire county." His house smelled like coffee boiled too long, paper, pipe tobacco, no one had smoked in years, and cold metal. The living room had surrendered to maps. They were pinned to walls, rolled in baskets, stacked on chairs, folded under mugs. Some were official utility maps. Others were hand-drawn grids on yellowed paper, marked in pencil and oil-smudged ink. Draft paused just inside the door, looked at all of it, and gave Harlan a stare of severe professional disappointment. Harlan stared back. "Don't judge my filing system, dog. It was already a mess when you were born." Roan almost smiled, but the room did not feel loose enough for it. Laurel stayed standing until Harlan cleared a chair by removing 3 pressure gauges and a stack of old maintenance cards. Roan did not sit. Draft settled near his boot, not relaxed, but present. His eyes moved from Harlan's hands to the maps and back. Harlan set a chipped mug on the table, but did not offer one to Roan. "Start talking." Laurel did. She did not embellish. That was one thing Roan respected about her. She laid out the warehouse incident, Tessa Wren's video, the damaged data module, Eliza's scan, Draft's registry status, and the missing part from the technical collar. She spoke in clean lines, each one placed where it belonged. Harlan listened without interruption. At first his face hardened into the expression of a man refusing entry to memory. When Laurel mentioned the registry line, retired due to task completion, his mouth tightened. When she described the pried-open collar port, he looked toward Draft again. "Show me the module," he said. Laurel removed an evidence bag from her coat pocket and placed it on the table without letting him touch it. Harlan leaned over, squinted through his old glasses, then turned on a desk lamp that threw a yellow circle over the scarred wood. He did not need long. "That's from a field collar system," he said. "You're sure?" Laurel asked. I'm old, not decorative. Roan looked at the bag. What does it do? Depends on the model. This one? Harlan pointed with a bent finger. GPS tags, timestamps, environmental notes if paired with a handheld, may be handler inputs. It doesn't prove a leak by itself, but it proves where the dog marked, when, and under what conditions. Draft-marked leaks? Roan asked. Harlan looked at him as if deciding whether the man deserved the answer. Then he nodded toward the dog. Dogs like him didn't replace meters. That's not how it worked. Natural gas gets odorant added so people can smell it. Mercaptan-type compounds, sulfur stink. A good dog could catch a trace where wind, snow, and terrain made a handheld reading unreliable. Dog alerts, handler flags the spot, tech confirms with instruments, then you log it. Sounds useful, Laurel said. It was. Harlan's voice turned dry. Which became the problem. The old man went to a cabinet near the stove and unlocked it with a key from his pocket. Inside were notebooks stacked by year, their spines labeled in black marker. He chose two and carried them back with both hands, not reverently, but carefully, as if they were sleeping animals. I worked for Clear Basin 29 years, he said. Back when the rule was simple. If there's a smell, you check. If you're not sure, you check anyway. Worst case, you waste an afternoon and some overtime. Best case, nobody wakes up to sirens. He opened the first notebook. Roan saw dates, route codes, valve numbers, weather notes, and cramped handwriting that looked impatient but exact. Then the new management came in, Harlan continued. Regional efficiency, cost tiers, risk scoring. They didn't say, ignore reports. People like that don't say things plain. They said, prioritize confirmed hazards. They said, avoid unnecessary excavation. They said canine units were producing too many non-critical alerts. Laurel's pencil moved across her waterproof notepad. Who said that? Harlan stopped. For a moment, the old house seemed to hold its breath. I signed papers when I left, he said. An NDA doesn't cover public safety, Laurel said. You a lawyer? No, but I know who to ask. Harlan's hand rested on the notebook. His knuckles were swollen, the nails ridged and dark with old work that never fully washed out. Roan recognized that kind of hand. Men like Harlan had built their lives by fixing things other people only noticed when they failed. I watched a young tech get pushed out for writing too much detail, Harlan said at last. Kid named Mason, good instincts, too honest for the room. After that, people learned to shorten sentences. Roan felt draft shift beside him. The dog's nose had angled toward the open notebook. Not to the paper, Roan thought. To the smell on it. Oil, field dust, maybe the ghost of old equipment. The past, if the past had a scent. Harlan turned several pages and tapped one entry. Sawtooth Rim, he said. Laurel leaned closer. That's the ranch cluster east of the ridge. Far enough from town that complaints take time to sound urgent. Harlan pulled a folded pipeline map from a tube and spread it across the floor because the table was too crowded. Line runs here, beneath the Lower Field Road, then splits near the Calder place and the old pump shelter. Roan knew the name only vaguely. He had repaired a generator out that way once, in a wind so sharp it made tools hurt to hold. Harlan opened a second notebook. 6 months ago, we had multiple odorant alerts in that area. Draft's unit was involved in at least 2, maybe 3. The official summary said, no immediate hazard. My notes said different. He slid the notebook toward Laurel. There, under a date from late autumn, Harlan had written, odorant trace, persistent after wind shift. Dog marked low ground near south fence. Recheck required before freeze. A later note read, do not wait until ground locks. The words looked ordinary. That made them worse. Roan stared at the sentence, do not wait. The room shifted beneath him, not visibly, not enough for anyone else to notice. But inside him, a door opened on a place he never visited willingly. Wait for confirmation. Wait for command. Wait for extraction. Wait for a voice far away to decide whether danger had become official. 2 men had waited with him under a sky that did not care about procedure. Roan's hand closed into a fist before he realized it. Laurel saw. "So," she said, deliberately steady, "the official report and your field notes conflict." "They don't conflict," Harlan said. "One got cleaned." "By who?" "By a process." Bitterness roughened the word. "That's how they keep hands clean. A report goes from field tech to supervisor to regional desk. Each stop makes the language smaller. Strong odorant trace becomes intermittent odor. Recheck required becomes monitor as resources allow. By the time it reaches the file, the danger has put on a necktie." Roan looked at the map. "And draft?" Harlan's eyes went to the dog. A dog can't soften a sentence. That was the trouble. He alerts or he doesn't. He marks where he marks. The collar records where he was. The handler notes what happened. Too many marks mean too many repairs. Laurel tapped her pencil once against the notepad. "A dog can't testify." "No." Harlan's expression went flat. "But the data trailing behind him can embarrass people who lie better than he does." Draft rose. No one had asked him to move. He stepped carefully onto the edge of the spread map, avoiding pressure on the wrapped leg. His head lowered. He smelled the paper, then the evidence bag on the table, then the air between them. "Harlan," Laurel said, a warning in her voice. "I'm not touching the evidence," he said. But he reached for the bag only by its corner, not opening it, and lowered it near the map. Draft's posture changed. His ears angled forward. The damaged collar around his neck, still loosely fitted for identification after Eliza's warning, gave a faint electronic chirp. One small sound, thin as a cricket under floorboards. Everyone froze. Draft lowered his nose to the sealed bag, inhaled, then turned toward the section of map Harlan had marked sawtooth rim. He stepped once, carefully, and placed his good front paw over the old line running near the Calder property. Roan felt the air go out of him, not because the dog understood maps. He did not. Roan knew that. Draft could not read route codes, ranch names, warning marks, or the old grief hiding in a technician's handwriting. But he knew scent. He knew equipment. He knew work. The room was suddenly full of things that had not been allowed to speak. Harlan's voice, when it came, sounded scraped from the inside of a pipe. He doesn't remember paperwork. Draft stood over the map, steady despite the hurt leg. Harlan looked at Roan. He remembers smell. Laurel's pencil had stopped moving. The old technician swallowed. And it looks like that smell never got taken care of. Roan wanted to act. The urge came up sharp and clean. Drive to Clear Basin, put the map in someone's face, force a door open, demand names, records, answers. Simple movement against a complicated wrong. Laurel seemed to read it before he spoke. "No," she said. Roan's eyes cut to her. "You don't know what I was going to say." "I know exactly what you were going to become." Laurel tucked her notepad away. "Suspicion is not evidence. A retired technician's notes, a dog's reaction, and a damaged module are important. They are not enough if we mishandle them." Roan's voice went low. "So we wait? We document. That word gets people hurt. So does charging in and giving their lawyers a gift-wrapped excuse to bury this." Laurel stepped closer, not challenging him, grounding him. "You want this to survive, it has to move correctly." Roan hated that she was right. Harlan closed his notebook with a soft thump. "Truth's a stubborn thing, Kessler, but it's not bulletproof. You don't just find it. You keep it alive long enough for the right people to see it." Roan looked at Draft. The dog still stood on the map, a wounded guardian over a line no one had wanted to dig up. Outside, Wind dragged snow over Harlan's yard of old valves and broken gauges. Objects other men had discarded sat half-buried, waiting for someone who knew their use. Roan had spent years thinking discarded things were best left alone. Safer that way. Cleaner. Less chance of finding responsibility breathing beneath them. But Draft looked at him then, dark muzzle dusted with pale paper lint from the map, torn ear-tilted, eyes stern and tired and oddly certain. Roan let out a slow breath. "Fine," he said. "We document." Laurel nodded once. Harlan reopened the notebook. No one smiled. No one spoke of justice as if it were a sunrise guaranteed by the gods. They started with dates. Russell Brackett believed in clean surfaces, clean desks, clean reports, clean shoes in dirty places. His office at Clear Basin Energy looked out over the regional yard through a wall of glass that reflected more than it revealed. The carpet was gray. The furniture was steel and pale wood. Even the company logo on the wall seemed sharper there, stripped of dust, snow, and the smell of diesel that clung to the loading bays below. Brackett sat behind his desk in a dark blue company jacket over a light shirt, his hair combed neatly to one side, silver beginning at the temples, but nowhere else allowed to appear untidy. He was 52 and carried himself with the ease of a man who had spent years discovering that a calm voice could move more people than a raised one. On the desk beside him lay 3 folders. One concerned the warehouse incident. One concerned the canine odorant program. The third concerned quarterly cost performance. Brackett touched the third first. That, more than anything, explained him. Deputy Laurel Haynes had requested records through proper channels 2 days earlier. Clear Basin responded quickly. Too quickly, in Roan Kessler's opinion. Laurel brought the packet to Harlan Voss's house that morning. Roan sat at the old technician's kitchen table while Draft lay beneath the window, his injured leg stretched carefully to one side. The German shepherd was healing, though slowly. Eliza had ordered rest. Draft had apparently interpreted that to mean remain motionless while judging everyone. Laurel dropped the company packet onto the table. "Here it is," she said. Harlan adjusted his glasses. That was fast. 26 hours. Then they had it ready before you asked. Roan looked at the stack. Meaning? Meaning either they are the best organized utility company in Idaho, Harlan said, or somebody expected questions. The paperwork was perfect. Draft's retirement form included dates, signatures, medical clearance language, and a box checked beside task completed. The damaged module found beneath the company van was listed in an equipment inventory as a non-functional legacy field component awaiting disposal. The 2 Clear Basin employees involved in the warehouse incident had filed statements claiming they were attempting to remove an unidentified stray animal from a restricted operational area. No mention of a catch pole, no mention of the wrench, no mention of the animal standing beside a company vehicle and guarding equipment carrying Clear Basin markings. Laurel tapped the page with one finger. If we did not have Tessa's video and warehouse camera footage, this would read like an animal control misunderstanding. Harlan gave a humorless laugh. That's the point. Roan turned to Draft. The dog's ears shifted at the rustle of paper, but he did not move. There was something almost insulting about seeing a living animal reduced to a line that said, "Retired properly." Roan knew the power of clean language. He had read casualty reports written in sentences so polished they seemed incapable of grief. Words like delayed communication, revised extraction window, operational complexity. Language could be useful. Language could also be a shovel. Harlan opened the canine program file and read for several minutes without speaking. Then his hand began to tremble. Not much. Roan noticed because Harlan was the kind of man whose hands were usually steadier than most machines. "What?" Laurel asked. Harlan pushed one page away. "Program efficiency concerns, Guido," he read. Alert frequency not aligned with confirmed maintenance outcomes. Roan frowned. Translate. Too many dog alerts led to inspections they didn't want to pay for. Laurel leaned over the page. That alone doesn't prove misconduct. No, Harlan said. It proves they learned to make the problem sound boring. His phone buzzed on the counter. He ignored it. It buzzed again. Then once more. Harlan swore under his breath and picked it up. The message was from Nora Whitcomb. Roan had not heard the name before. Harlan read silently, jaw tightening. Laurel, he said, you're going to want to see this. Nora Whitcomb had worked 12 years in Clear Basin administration, mostly maintenance scheduling, inspection coordination, and document routing. She had left the company 8 months earlier, officially for personal reasons. Harlan described her as the sort of woman who could remember a work order number from 6 years ago but still misplace her glasses while wearing them. She had refused to meet anyone in person, but she had kept copies. Harlan opened the attachments. The first was an internal email chain. The second was a budget memo. The third was a scheduling note tied to rural line inspections. The name Russell Brackett appeared repeatedly. Most of the wording was careful. Prioritize high-confidence findings. Reduce unnecessary field mobilizations. Reassess canine support utilization. Then Harlan reached one line and stopped. He read it twice. Laurel took the phone. Roan watched her eyes narrow. What does it say? She turned the screen toward him. Canine-generated alert volume is not compatible with current quarterly cost targets. There was nothing dramatic about the sentence. No threat, no confession, no secret code. That made it worse. It sounded like something written between a spreadsheet and lunch. Harlan's fingers curled around the edge of the table. You see, he said. That's how it starts, not with somebody saying, ignore danger. Nobody writes that. They say the alert volume is incompatible with cost targets. Then somebody below them learns what kind of answer keeps their job. Roan looked at the email again. In the old part of his mind, the part he had spent years trying to starve, a map began forming. Not of roads, of responsibility. Eliza had the chip scan and medical record. Harlan had field notebooks. Laurel had witness statements and video. Tessa had the original phone recording. Nora had internal emails. And Draft had the collar and whatever history remained inside it. No single piece was enough. Together, they began to look like a shape. Roan disliked shapes that required committees. We take all of it to Boise, he said. Laurel looked at him. Eventually? Not eventually. Roan, we have records. We have the dog. We have a former technician saying field warnings were softened. And we have allegations that need authentication. Laurel's voice stayed even. Nora's emails need metadata checked. Harlan's notebooks need to be copied and dated. The company records need preservation requests. The module needs a technical examination. Roan pushed back from the table. You keep saying need like time is guaranteed. Harlan looked at him but said nothing. Laurel did. You're not in a combat zone. Roan's jaw set. She continued before he could answer. If you drive into Boise alone with a box of copied emails and start accusing a utility company of hiding safety issues, they do not have to prove you wrong. They only have to make you look unstable. The room went still. Draft raised his head. Laurel's words hit exactly where she had aimed, though Roan suspected she regretted the force of them as soon as they landed. You don't get to use that word, he said. I didn't. You meant it. I meant that procedure protects the evidence from becoming about you. Roan stood. Laurel stood too, but she did not square herself against him. She simply held her ground. This is not war, she said. You go alone. You make yourself the story. And once you become the story, Clear Basin stops having to answer the right questions. Roan stared at her. Part of him knew she was right. That was the worst part. He had spent years believing calm saved lives. Then calm had become delay. Delay had become absence. Now everyone around him was asking for patience, as if patience had never buried anyone. Draft got to his feet and came over without being called. He did not lean against Roan this time. He simply stood beside him. A presence, not a plea. Roan looked down at the torn ear, the steady eyes, the bandaged leg. Then he sat again, not because Laurel had won, because this time walking out would have meant walking away from people who were trying to carry the same weight. That was new. Later that afternoon, Roan drove east to Sawtooth Rim for a generator job he had scheduled before the warehouse incident. The Calder Ranch sat in a wide fold of land where snow gathered along fence lines and the mountains appeared close enough to touch. Sheep clustered beneath open-sided shelters, their wool gray-white against the field. A long barn faced south, and a squat backup generator hummed beneath a metal hood near the equipment shed. Wayne Calder met Roan at the drive. He was 71, tall and narrow, with a face shaped by wind, sun, and the stubborn belief that machinery should last longer than people selling it. His winter hat had ear flaps he refused to tie. "You brought supervision," Wayne said, looking at Draft. Roan glanced down. "He's on medical leave." Wayne studied the German shepherd's stern face. "Looks federal." Draft stared back. Wayne nodded. "Definitely federal. Disappointed in my sheep already." That earned Roan the edge of a smile. Judith Calder came out carrying a bowl of water before anyone asked. She was 69, silver-haired, warm-faced, wrapped in a sage-green sweater beneath an old fleece-lined coat. She set the bowl several feet from Draft and stepped away without reaching for him. "Let him decide," she said. Roan noticed that. So did Draft. After a minute, he drank. While Roan opened the generator housing, Paula Reyes came around the corner of the barn, carrying a coil of rope over one shoulder. She was 42, compact and strong, with dark hair pulled into a low braid and the steady expression of someone who noticed animals before people. She managed livestock for the Calders and had the kind of silence that did not feel shy. Paula watched Draft for a while. "He yours?" "No." Wayne snorted. "That answer's aging badly." Roan ignored him. Paula crouched several feet from Draft, not trying to touch him. "He doesn't move like a stray," she said. Roan looked over. Draft had positioned himself where he could see the drive, the barn, and Roan at the generator. Paula tilted her head. "He looks like an employee who hasn't been paid." Judith laughed softly. Wayne pointed at the dog. "See? Federal." Roan went back to the generator, but Paula's sentence stayed with him. Not a stray, not a clue, an employee, and... It bothered him because it was accurate in a way none of the paperwork had been. Draft had worked, he had been trained, sent into bad weather, expected to alert, expected to hold position, expected to trust the humans following him. Then somebody decided his usefulness cost too much. Roan tightened a terminal with more force than necessary. "Easy," Wayne said. "Machine didn't write the memo." Roan glanced at him. Wayne smiled. The generator had a cracked relay connection and a tired battery cable. Roan replaced both, ran a load test, and listened until the engine settled into an even rhythm. As he packed up, Draft wandered only as far as the leash allowed and stopped near the southern fence. His nose lifted into the wind. Just once. Roan noticed. So did Paula. Neither said anything. There was no alert, no mystery, only a dog reading a landscape the way other men read weather. By dusk, Roan was back at his cabin with copies of Harlan's notes in a folder on the table and Laurel's instructions written across the top page. Organize, duplicate, authenticate, preserve originals. For once, Roan followed them. He scanned what could be scanned. He labeled photographs. He placed Eliza's report separately from the company documents. He made a written timeline of the warehouse incident. Every act of organization irritated him. Every act also made the case harder to dismiss. Draft lay near the stove, chin on his paws. "You enjoying this?" Draft did not move. "Thought so." Across town, in the second-floor office of Clear Basin Energy, Russell Brackett stood at his window and watched snow begin to fall over the yard lights. A member of the operations team had briefed him on Laurel's records request, then on Harlan Voss, then on the former SEAL who had taken custody of the dog. Brackett did not curse. He did not slam his fist into the desk. He turned a silver pen slowly between two fingers and opened the calendar on his computer. The quarterly budget meeting was 4 days away. He made one phone call. The person on the other end answered quickly. Brackett looked down at a spreadsheet showing rural maintenance costs. "Kessler is preparing a package," he said. A pause. "No, nothing dramatic." He rotated the pen once more. "Just make sure it doesn't reach the right desk before the budget meeting." He listened, then added almost pleasantly, "After that, everything becomes much easier to explain." He ended the call and returned to the spreadsheet. Outside, snow covered the Clear Basin yard, one clean layer at a time. By late afternoon, Roan Kessler had built the case into a box. Not a real box, not yet. At first it was spread across his kitchen table in pieces. Printed emails from Nora Whitcomb, photocopied pages from Harlan Voss's notebooks, photographs of the damaged field module, Dr. Eliza North's scan of Draft's chip, Deputy Laurel Haynes's preliminary incident report, and a written statement from Tessa Wren describing what she had filmed behind the Clear Basin warehouse. There were labels now, dates, names, page numbers, copies marked copy in black ink so no one could pretend they were originals. A separate envelope held a thumb drive with Tessa's video and warehouse camera footage. A yellow sticky note in Laurel's handwriting read, "Do not hand this to anyone except the State Safety Office or me." Roan had stared at that sentence for longer than he cared to admit. Do not hand this to anyone. There had been a time when he carried orders in sealed packets, maps folded into waterproof sleeves, coordinates memorized in case paper failed. Back then, everything important had weight, equipment, ammunition, radio batteries, men leaning against each other in the dark because fatigue had made pride too expensive. This evidence weighed almost nothing. A folder, a thumb drive, a few photographs. Still, Roan could feel it on the table like a sleeping animal. Draft lay near the stove, his bandaged front leg stretched out. The German shepherd's technical collar had been loosened since Eliza examined him, but the scratched plate still rested against his thick black and tan fur. One side sat slightly crooked now, never quite right after the port had been damaged and handled as evidence. Draft tolerated it with the grim dignity of someone wearing a uniform after the service had forgotten his name. "You're not coming to Boise," Roan said. Draft opened one eye. "It's a long drive." The eye remained open. "You're injured." Draft blinked once slowly, as if Roan had made a weak legal argument. Roan looked back at the folder. Laurel had advised waiting until morning. She wanted one more copy scanned. Harlan wanted to add another notebook page. Eliza had suggested getting the collar photographed in better light. All reasonable, all careful, all the things people said before delay became a creature with claws. The State Safety Office in Boise would close soon, but Roan knew the front desk had an after-hours intake. He had called. Twice. The second time, a tired clerk confirmed that sealed documentation could be left with security and logged for review the next business day. It was not perfect. It was movement, and Roan needed movement before the walls of the cabin began to feel like a command to wait. He packed the documents into a black weatherproof field satchel, the kind he used for invoices and repair manuals when snow tried to turn paper into pulp. He slid the thumb drive into an interior pocket, zipped the satchel, then placed it on the passenger seat of his truck. Draft limped after him to the door. "No." The dog stood there, one torn ear tilted. Roan pointed toward the bed near the stove. "Rest." Draft looked at the bed, then back at him. Roan had faced men with less conviction. "Fine," he said at last, "but you stay in the cab." The sky had already begun to close. Clouds lowered over the valley, turning the mountains into dark shapes behind a veil of blowing snow. The road out of town would be ugly, but passable if he left quickly. Roan warmed the truck, cleared the windshield, and lifted Draft carefully into the passenger side when the dog's bad leg failed halfway up. Draft allowed the help with visible disapproval. "You're welcome," Roan muttered. The German Shepherd faced forward, eyes alert, as if preparing to critique road conditions for the Department of Transportation. Roan drove into town before turning south toward the highway. Snow flurried across the road in thin white lines. Houses glowed behind frosted windows. A church sign near the corner had lost 2 letters, leaving a message that read, "Grace Hall S. On," which seemed either damaged or more honest than before. He stopped at the old Chevron near the edge of town for coffee and tie-down straps. The place had 2 pumps, a flickering sign, and a bell over the door that sounded like it had been protesting winter since 1987. Draft stayed in the cab, lying low but watching through the windshield. Roan locked the truck. Then he checked the lock again. Inside, the clerk was arguing with a coffee machine that had apparently chosen martyrdom. Roan bought the straps, a black coffee, and a packet of beef jerky he did not remember picking up. The clerk asked if the roads were bad south of town. "Getting there," Roan said. "Always getting there." The clerk sighed. "Never asks permission." Roan stepped back outside. The truck door was not fully closed. At first his mind refused the information. It presented him with a smaller problem: wind. Maybe the latch had not caught. Maybe the old door had bounced against the frame. Maybe he had checked the lock on a truck that had already decided to embarrass him. Then he saw the snow disturbed near the passenger side. Not much. A drag mark. A boot print half filled by fresh flakes. The shape of someone turning too quickly. Roan crossed the lot in 4 strides. Draft was still inside. The German Shepherd stood rigid in the footwell, lips pulled back, but not barking. His technical collar hung crooked, twisted hard to one side. The damaged port had been exposed again. A short strip of fur stuck in the metal catch as if someone had grabbed and yanked before meeting teeth, force, or a refusal too sharp to continue. The satchel was gone. For a second there was no sound, not the pumps, not the bell over the door. Not the wind moving over the lot, just Roan's hand on the open truck door and the old cold rising inside him. He looked under the seat, behind it, in the bed, beneath the truck. Nothing. The case he had organized, the first complete shape of the truth, had vanished into a storm that was very good at swallowing tracks. Draft made a low sound. Roan turned toward him. The dog was trembling, not from fear exactly, from contained effort, from the insult of being touched, from the pain of twisting on an injured leg to keep someone from taking more than they already had. Roan reached toward the collar, then stopped. "Easy," he said. Draft's eyes were bright and hard. Roan had wanted to move quickly. Now movement had come from somewhere else. He went back inside and asked for the security camera. The clerk, startled by the look on his face, did not argue. The camera over the pumps had a film of frost across its casing and pointed too far toward the road. It showed a gray blur passing near Roan's truck, then snow, then nothing useful. Of course, the gods of small towns had a cruel sense of humor. They gave everyone opinions and no working camera when it mattered. Roan called Laurel. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Haynes." "The satchel's gone." A pause. "Where are you?" "Old Chevron." "Draft?" "With me." "Are you hurt?" "No." "The dog?" Collar got pulled. He stopped them from taking it. Laurel's voice changed. "Do not leave." "I'm not waiting in a gas station while—" "Roan." Her tone cut clean through the storm. "Do not give them a second scene. I'll send a unit. Stay there." He looked toward the highway where red tail lights dissolved in snow. Everything in him leaned toward pursuit. No direction, no vehicle description, no useful camera. Just the pure, foolish need to chase something, because standing still felt like surrender. Draft stepped down from the cab without permission and put weight on the bad leg. It nearly buckled. He caught himself, breathing hard. Roan swore softly and moved to support him. The dog did not pull away. That stopped him more effectively than Laurel's order. Roan looked down at Draft's crooked collar, at the bandaged leg, at the animal who had already refused to give up one piece of himself in a parking lot full of snow and bad light. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the truck was still there. The road was still blind. The satchel was still gone. There would be no heroic chase, only paperwork, again, only the wound of having been careful too late. By the time Laurel arrived, Roan had already replayed the mistake 100 times. He should have brought backup. He should have waited. He should have kept the satchel on him. He should have listened when Laurel said one more copy. He should have known better than to trust a lock, a clerk, a camera, a 5-minute errand, a world that had already taught him the price of delayed vigilance. Laurel took his statement beside the pump, snow collecting on her shoulders. She did not say, "I told you so." That almost made it worse. "We still have originals," she said. "Harlan has his notebooks. Eliza has the scan. Tessa has the video. Nora can resend the emails." Roan stared at the tire tracks near the pump. That satchel connected all of it. And now we connect it again. You make it sound easy. I make it sound possible. He wanted to argue. The words came up like sparks, hot and useless. But Draft leaned against the truck, exhausted, and the sight of him burned away whatever Roan had been about to say. Laurel photographed the truck door, the disturbed snow, and the collar. She bagged a few caught fibers from the metal catch with gloved hands. Procedure? Always procedure. This time, Roan did not mock it. He watched it become a small net, cast into a large, dark river. When Laurel finally let him leave, she told him to go home. "Don't drive to Boise tonight," she said. "I don't have the satchel." "You still have a dog who needs rest." Roan looked at Draft. The German shepherd looked back as if irritated that his medical condition was being used in debate. Roan drove home through a white tunnel of a storm. The cabin lights came on with a dull click. He helped Draft down, brought him inside, and shut the door harder than necessary. Snow shook loose from the lintel. Draft began pacing. Not far because of the leg. Door to window, window to stove, stove to door. Each turn tighter than the last. His collar still sat wrong despite Roan's attempt to straighten it. His breathing was high and restless. A soft sound came from his throat, not a bark, not a whine, but something wounded by confusion. Roan dropped the truck keys onto the table. The empty table, the table where the case had been. Draft circled again. "Stop," Roan said. The dog did not. Draft. Another turn. Door, window, stove. Roan's hands clenched. The storm pressed against the cabin. The lost satchel sat like a hole in the room. In his mind, the old radio crackled. Wait, hold, stand by. Not yet, not yet, not yet. Draft made the sound again. Roan turned, voice sharp. Enough! The dog froze. The cabin froze with him. Draft took one step back. That was all. No cowering, no dramatic collapse. Just one step from a creature who had been grabbed in a parking lot, cornered behind a warehouse, listed as retired by the people who had used him, and still chosen to stand beside Roan. One step. It broke something cleaner than anger. Roan saw himself then, not as the man who had lost a satchel, not as the man trying to force a dangerous company into daylight, but as another human voice making the room unsafe for the only living thing that had not abandoned the mission. He sat down on the floor. Not near Draft, several feet away, his back against the cabinet, knees bent, hands open on his thighs. The apology did not come easily. Words like that had rust on them. They scraped their way out. "I'm not mad at you." Draft stayed by the door. Roan swallowed. "I'm mad because I let them take it. I'm mad because I should have—" He stopped. Should have was a pit with no bottom. He tried again. "You did your job." The stove popped softly. Outside, the wind moved snow across the porch like sand across a grave road. Roan lowered his voice. "I'm not mad at you." For a long while, Draft did not move. Then the German shepherd limped across the cabin. Slowly. Not because forgiveness in the world came cheap, but because trust, like a bridge in winter, could hold if enough weight crossed carefully. He stopped in front of Roan and lowered his head. His dark muzzle came to rest on Roan's knee. No tail wag, no bright absolution, no miracle song from the heavens. Just the warm weight of a breathing animal saying, in the only language he owned, "I am still here." Roan placed one hand on the floor beside him, not on Draft. After another minute, Draft shifted closer until his shoulder touched Roan's leg. Roan looked at the crooked collar. "I'll fix it," he said. It was not clear whether he meant the collar, the case, the mistake, or something older than all three. The phone rang at 9:17 p.m. "Harlan Voss." Roan answered from the floor. "What?" "Wayne Calder called me." Harlan's voice had lost its usual gravelly annoyance. What remained was worse, fear trying to stand upright. "Says there's a sulfur smell down by the south barn when the wind shifts." Roan went still. Draft lifted his head. "Did he call Clear Basin?" Roan asked. "Judith did. They told her a crew could check within 2 business days. Roan closed his eyes. 2 business days. The phrase sounded like polished stone dropped into deep water. "Harlan?" "I know." The old technician breathed hard. "Paula says the sheep are crowding the north fence. Their house dog won't cross the yard. Backup generator at the south barn is set to auto start if the power dips." Roan stood. Draft stood faster. The injured leg wobbled, but he was already facing the door. Roan stared at him. The satchel was gone. The clean story had been stolen. The copies would have to be rebuilt. The right desk in Boise would have to wait. But the smell at Sawtooth Rim was not waiting. Roan reached for his jacket. Then he stopped. His hand hovered over the hook. The old Roan would already have been out the door. Truck started. Rifleless war in his blood. No call, no plan, no witness, but the storm. He would have told himself speed was the same as courage. Draft watched him. So did the empty table. Roan picked up the phone again and called Laurel. She answered quickly, as if she had been expecting trouble to find a new shape. "Haynes?" "It's Calder Ranch," Roan said. "Sulfur smell near the south barn. Livestock acting wrong. Backup generator on auto start." "Who reported it?" "Harlan got the call from Wayne. Paula's on site. Judith called Clear Basin. They gave her 2 business days." Laurel said something under her breath that did not sound official. Roan looked at Draft. The dog stood by the door, torn ear forward, bandaged leg trembling, every part of him pointed toward the dark. Roan spoke before the old habit could take the wheel. "I need you," he said. "Call the fire crew." For 1 second, neither of them said anything. Then Laurel answered, "All business. I'm on it. Stay on the line." Roan clipped the leash to Draft's collar with careful hands. The collar sat crooked, but it held. Outside, the storm waited like a great white animal. Inside, Roan opened the door. This time, he did not step into it alone. The road to Sawtooth Rim vanished and returned in pieces. One moment, Roan Kessler could see the twin red lights of Deputy Laurel Haynes's patrol vehicle ahead of him, blurred by blowing snow. The next, the storm swallowed them, and he was driving toward nothing but a white wall with teeth. Harlan Voss rode in the passenger seat of Roan's truck with an old pipeline map unfolded across his knees, one hand braced against the dash whenever the tires slipped. He had refused to stay behind, which had surprised no one and annoyed everyone. "You're too old to be bouncing around in a blizzard," Roan had told him. Harlan had climbed into the truck anyway. "And you're too young to think muscle replaces local knowledge." Draft lay in the back seat under a wool blanket, his bandaged front leg tucked close. The technical collar sat crooked against his neck, its damaged port covered with temporary tape Eliza had given Roan. The German shepherd had not made a sound since they left the cabin. That silence did not comfort Roan. It felt like a held breath. Behind them, 2 volunteer fire trucks followed with lights turning red through the snow. Sawtooth Rim did not have the kind of fire department cities showed off in recruitment posters. It had farmers, mechanics, a retired school principal, and a young equipment operator named Vince Caro, who could back a tanker through a gate in weather that made angels reconsider flying. They were not glamorous, they were what the county had, and that made them sacred in a practical, mud-on-boots sort of way. Laurel's voice crackled over Rowan's phone, connected through the truck speakers. "Calder says everyone's still inside the main house. Paula's at the barn, but keeping distance from the south generator. I told them no switches, no engines, no open flames, no unnecessary phone use near the suspected area." Harlan grunted. "Good." Roan kept his eyes on the road. "How far?" "Half-mile," Harlan said, then frowned at the map as if it had personally insulted him. "If the mailbox hasn't been eaten by a snowdrift." The truck hit a rut and lurched. Draft lifted his head. Roan saw it in the rearview mirror. The dog's ears rose. His nose moved once, then again, slower. His body tightened beneath the blanket as the truck climbed the last bend. The injured leg no longer seemed to matter to him. Some old switch had been thrown inside his bones. Harlan noticed too. "Roan." "I see him." Draft pushed himself upright, eyes fixed beyond the windshield, though the ranch was still hidden by snow and dark. His torn ear angled forward. His chest expanded with one deep breath. He remembered this place. Not the house, not the Calders, not names, fences, or ranch roads. The work, the invisible thing beneath the weather. When they reached the ranch, the storm opened just enough to reveal a yard full of restless shapes. The main house glowed with yellow windows on the rise. Below it, the south barn sat long and dark, its metal roof lined with snow. A low equipment shed stood near the barn, and beside it, under a hood, the backup generator showed a blinking amber light. Roan saw that light and felt his stomach harden. Stand by. Waiting. Wayne Calder came out onto the porch wearing his coat half-buttoned and his winter hat crooked. Judith stood behind him with a scarf wrapped high at her throat, one hand on the doorframe. Even from the truck, Roan could see that the old man was trying to look more irritated than worried. Laurel parked sideways across the drive and stepped out. "Wayne," she called. "Nobody starts a vehicle. Nobody touches a switch. Everybody comes down here slowly." Wayne raised both hands. "Deputy, I've had strange smells around barns since before you were born." Judith struck his arm lightly. "Wayne." "What? I'm coming." Paula Reyes emerged from the direction of the barn with a flashlight clipped to her coat. Snow clung to her braid and shoulders. She moved fast but not carelessly, boots placed with the confidence of someone who knew every dip in the yard. "The sheep are all pressed north," she said before anyone asked. "They won't settle. Ranger won't cross the open yard." "Ranger?" Laurel asked. "Our herding dog." Paula pointed toward the porch, where a stocky black and white dog stood rigid near the steps, refusing to come farther. He's stubborn, not stupid. Harlan climbed down from Roan's truck with a groan and opened the map against the hood. Snow dotted the old paper immediately. "South barn," he said. "Low ground by the equipment shed. Old lateral line runs under that field road, then bends near the fence." The fire crew arrived in a growl of engines and air brakes. Chief Dan Mercer stepped down from the lead truck, a thick man in his late 50s with a silver mustache iced at the ends and eyes made sharp by 30 winters of bad calls. He had no interest in drama. He wanted distances, wind direction, and what might make sparks. "Laurel," he said. "Possible gas leak. Odor reported near South Barn. Livestock behavior abnormal. Backup generator on auto start." Chief Mercer's expression changed at the last phrase. "Kill that generator from a safe point if we can," he said. Roan was already looking at the setup. "Not at the unit." Mercer turned to him. "Roan Kessler," Laurel said. "Generator tech, former military. He knows the equipment." "Former doesn't matter," Mercer said. "Generator does. Talk." Roan appreciated him instantly. "The transfer switch may trigger if line power dips. If there's gas pocketing near the shed, we don't want that engine cycling. We need to isolate from the main disconnect up by the service panel, not down there." Wayne started forward. "I can show you." "No," Laurel said. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Wayne stopped. Judith took his arm. Paula looked toward the south barn. "Smells stronger when wind drops." As if hearing her, the wind shifted. A bitter trace crossed the yard, not strong, not overwhelming, just a sharp sulfur-like thread under snow, manure, cold metal, and animal breath. Draft stood inside the open truck door. Roan had not opened it. He must have nudged the latch from inside when Harlan climbed out. The German shepherd stood half in shadow, blanket fallen away, every line of him awake. His injured leg trembled. "Absolutely not," Roan said. Draft looked at him. It was not defiance. It was worse. Duty. Harlan's face softened with something like sorrow. "He knows." Chief Mercer glanced between them. "Dog trained for this?" "Odorant detection support," Harlan said. "He marks a suspected point. We confirm with meters." Mercer did not waste time. "Long line only. Nobody follows him into a hot zone without readings. We go slow." Roan clipped a long lead to Draft's collar, careful not to touch the damaged port. He crouched and met the dog's eyes. "You don't run," he said. "You don't prove anything. You work, then you come back." Draft stared at him with the exhausted patience of a professional being briefed by management. Harlan muttered, "He's thinking he knew that before you did." "Helpful," Roan said. "Usually." Draft stepped down. The moment his paws touched snow, the yard seemed to rearrange around him. People stopped speaking. Even Wayne, who had opinions stored like spare fence wire, went quiet. Draft lowered his nose. He did not race toward the barn. He moved with almost humble precision. 3 steps, pause, head angle into the wind. 2 steps left, stop, circle back, nose low near snow crust, then lifted to catch the air. His bad leg made every movement cost him, but he did not hurry. He seemed to understand that urgency and panic were different animals, and only one of them was useful. Roan followed with the line loose in his gloved hand, not leading, listening. That was the strange part. He had spent most of his life trained to move first, decide fast, impose order on chaos by force of discipline. Now the correct thing was to follow a wounded dog through snow and trust that the old training inside Draft was not a ghost, but a map. At the edge of the yard, one of the firefighters called out readings from a handheld meter. "Low trace here, wind's messing with it." Another firefighter moved wide, testing from the north side. Laurel kept Wayne, Judith, and Paula back near the patrol vehicle. Judith's hands were clasped tight in front of her chest. Wayne looked angry, but Roan could tell the anger had nowhere to go and had settled for his jaw. Paula watched Draft, eyes narrowed, not in doubt, but recognition. She was reading animal behavior, and what she saw did not calm her. Draft stopped near the equipment shed. The amber light on the generator blinked through blowing snow. Roan felt every flash like a pulse in the throat. Draft turned away from it. Good dog. He pulled left away from the unit, then curved toward a lower patch between the fence and a drifted service track. There, the snow lay smoother, slightly sunken, as if the ground beneath had breathed differently than the rest of the yard. Draft lowered his nose, stopped, backed up, came in again from another angle. Harlan, watching from near the truck with his map half folded against the wind, shouted, "That's near the old bend." Draft scraped once at the snow with his good paw. Then again. Then he froze. His head came up. His eyes found Roan. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped backward. Half a pace. No bark, no flourish, no heroic pose for an invisible audience. Just the signal he had been trained to give when the smell was too concentrated to stand over. Roan's skin prickled beneath his jacket. "Mark!" he called. The fire crew moved in measured increments, meters extended, boots careful, bodies angled away from the suspected patch. Chief Mercer held up a hand, then looked at the reading. His face went still. "Back," he ordered. "Everyone back. Confirmed elevated concentration." Wayne swore softly. Judith whispered something Roan did not catch. A prayer, maybe? Or a name? Most prayers were names when the world narrowed. Paula turned immediately toward the barn. "The ewes—" "Not yet," Laurel said. "My animals are in there. And I want you alive to yell at us about them later." Paula's mouth tightened, but she stayed. That was courage too, Roan thought, not running into danger, letting others do their work while every instinct screamed at you to move. Chief Mercer pointed to Roan. "Service panel?" Roan had already mapped it in his head from the repair visit. "North wall of the pump shed, upwind. We can isolate the transfer before the generator tries to cycle." "I'll send Vince with you." "No metal tools unless necessary," Roan said. "Insulated gloves. No radio chatter right next to the shed." Mercer nodded once. "Do it." The next few minutes became a ceremony of restraint. Nobody rushed. Nobody shouted unless the wind stole the words. Roan and Vince moved wide to the pump shed while 2 firefighters monitored readings. Laurel guided Wayne and Judith toward her patrol vehicle. Harlan stood near the map and called out the old valve location from memory, his voice steady now because fear had found a job. Paula helped Judith over a ridge of snow, then turned back just long enough to whistle once toward Ranger. The ranch dog finally broke from the porch and trotted to her side, low and uneasy. Roan opened the service panel with careful hands. The switch inside was cold beneath his glove. In another life, his hand had waited over other switches, other triggers, other decisions that arrived wrapped in rules. This one was simple. Not easy. Simple. He looked toward the south barn. Draft stood with a firefighter holding his lead now, far back from the marked patch. The dog was shaking from effort, but still upright, watching Roan. Roan pulled the disconnect. The amber standby light on the generator went dark. Nothing happened. That was the miracle. No blast of sound, no flash, no great cinematic punishment from the heavens. Just a dangerous machine made quiet before it could become the wrong kind of dawn. Chief Mercer exhaled hard. "Power isolated." Harlan pointed toward the line valve beyond the fence. "Main isolation's there, old box under the drift." The crew found it after several tense minutes of digging through packed snow. They worked with the delicacy of surgeons and the language of farmers repairing a stubborn gate. At last the valve turned. The readings began to fall, not to nothing, but enough for breath to return to the yard. Laurel documented everything: time, readings, location, witnesses, Actions taken. Her yellow notebook looked almost absurd against the storm, a small square of order in a world that kept trying to blur itself. Roan brought Draft back toward the fire truck. The German shepherd had reached the end of himself. He made it 3 steps, then his injured leg buckled. Roan caught him under the chest before he hit the snow. This time, Draft did not resist. Roan lifted him carefully, feeling the weight of bone, muscle, wet fur, and stubborn life. The dog's head rested briefly against his shoulder. It was not surrender. It was trust under emergency conditions, which was stronger. By the time Russell Brackett arrived, the immediate danger had been contained. His Clear Basin SUV rolled up the drive too cleanly for the storm, headlights sweeping across fire trucks, patrol lights, and a yard full of people who no longer looked willing to be managed. Brackett stepped out in a dark company coat, the logo bright on his chest, his hair barely disturbed under a wool cap. He looked like a man attending a difficult meeting, not a near disaster. "Deputy Haynes," he called. "I understand there's been an unverified odor complaint." Laurel turned toward him slowly. Chief Mercer, beside her, held up the meter log. "Verified elevated gas concentration near the South Line Bend. Area isolated. State notification recommended." Brackett's smile did not vanish. It merely became thinner. "Weather can create misleading readings," he said. "Temperature inversion, animal waste, equipment residue." Harlan laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Russell," he said, stepping into the light, "you always did know how to put a necktie on a skunk." Brackett's eyes moved to him. "Mr. Voss, I wasn't aware you were authorized to be involved." "I was authorized by knowing where your old pipe sits." Laurel stepped between them before the words could sharpen further. "Clear Basin will preserve all records tied to this line, the canine odorant alerts from the last 12 months, and dispatch logs regarding tonight's call. Formal request follows." Brackett folded his gloved hands. "Of course, we'll cooperate fully." Roan stood near the rear of the fire truck with Draft wrapped again in the wool blanket. The dog lay on the metal floor, sides moving heavily, eyes half closed. His collar still sat crooked. Snow melted from his fur and pooled beneath him. Brackett looked at Draft. For the first time, something like irritation slipped through his polished face. Not fear, not guilt, annoyance, as if a discarded tool had rolled back underfoot at the worst possible moment. Roan saw it, and the sight clarified something. Draft had never been the secret. Draft was the witness to a way of thinking, a living record of what happened when usefulness was valued more than life, until even loyalty became an expense line to be deleted. Roan crouched beside him. Around them, the ranch slowly settled. Wayne held Judith close with one arm and pretended the wind was why his eyes watered. Paula stood with Ranger pressed against her knee, staring toward the south barn as if memorizing the exact shape of almost. Harlan folded his map with hands that no longer trembled. Laurel wrote the final time in her notebook. Chief Mercer radioed for state utility notification. The danger had not become tragedy. That was the kind of victory most people never saw. The kind without medals, without speeches, without a clean ending. Roan took off his canvas jacket and laid it over Draft. The German shepherd gave one faint sigh, the sound of a gate settling shut after a long night. Roan placed a hand on his back. This time, Draft did not keep his head aimed toward the door of the fire truck. He turned slightly, just enough that his torn ear rested against the blanket, and closed his eyes facing Roan. For a while, snow crossed the red emergency lights like sparks from some cold, ancient forge, and in that glow, the dog slept. The first official notice arrived 3 days after Sawtooth Rim. It came by email to Deputy Laurel Haynes, by registered letter to Clear Basin Energy, and by the kind of phone calls that made people in small towns stand very still while listening. The Idaho State Energy Safety Office was opening an investigation into Clear Basin's rural leak response practices, with specific attention to delayed inspections, altered maintenance schedules, and the discontinued canine odorant detection program. No one in town cheered. Not at first. Real accountability did not arrive like thunder over a mountain. It came more like winter machinery starting in the dark. Slow, reluctant, coughing at first, then finding rhythm one turn at a time. Roan Kessler read the notice at his kitchen table while Draft slept near the stove. The German shepherd's bandaged leg had improved enough that he no longer carried it like a broken oath, but he still favored it after too much movement. His technical collar lay on the table now, tagged and photographed, no longer worn except when necessary for identification. In its place, Draft wore a plain leather collar with a small metal tag Eliza had stamped herself. Draft. 5 letters, no company number, no status code, no clean little phrase declaring him finished. Just a name. Roan ran his thumb once over the edge of the notice, then set it down beside a cooling mug of coffee. Harlan Voss had been right. Truth was not bulletproof. It had to be carried carefully, copied, dated, signed, witnessed, and protected from every hand that wanted to soften it into fog. The stolen satchel had slowed them down, but it had not ended the case. Laurel had rebuilt the packet with a patience that could have shamed stone. Harlan had copied his notebooks page by page, cursing the machine whenever the scanner hummed. Eliza had supplied Draft's records, photos of the collar marks, and a statement that used no dramatic words, yet somehow made every line ache. Tessa Wren had uploaded the original video from the warehouse, then made 3 backups, because in her words, "I trust the cloud, but I trust spite more." Nora Whitcomb came forward under protected conditions. She did not arrive like a heroic whistleblower in a movie. She arrived like a woman who had been tired for a long time. Laurel met her first in a county office, after hours. Later, Roan saw her only once, from across a hallway while she spoke with investigators. Nora was in her late 40s, with dark blonde hair pinned too tightly and a cardigan buttoned wrong at the bottom, as if she had dressed while thinking about 20 things at once. She held a folder against her chest with both arms. Her face carried the pale, strained look of someone who had spent years knowing where the bodies of truth were buried in file cabinets. She gave them emails, scheduling notes, internal comments attached to rural maintenance reviews. Not one document said, "Ignore danger." Men like Russell Brackett did not write sentences that naked. But the pattern showed itself anyway. Alerts downgraded, visits delayed, field notes shortened, canine support described as inefficient. Remote ranch routes marked low priority unless a customer called repeatedly. Sawtooth Rim had called. Clear Basin had answered with 2 business days. By the end of the week, the case moved beyond the county. State investigators requested access to Clear Basin's digital maintenance system. When they found signs that inspection schedules across multiple rural lines had been adjusted after field alerts, the matter was referred for federal review. Still, no one was marched away in chains. No villain fell to his knees beneath a cord of lightning. Russell Brackett was placed on administrative suspension pending investigation. That was all the first announcement said. Clean words, careful words. But for once, the clean language did not bury the danger. It pointed toward it. The 2 Clear Basin employees from the warehouse were questioned again about the damaged field module and who had instructed them to retrieve equipment from the van. Their stories, once polished, began to scratch against each other. One claimed he thought Draft was a stray. The other admitted someone from operations had told them the dog was company property and should not leave the yard. Company property. When Roan heard that phrase, he looked at Draft, who was lying upside down near the stove with one paw in the air and his torn ear flattened sideways in complete disregard for corporate ownership. "You hear that?" Roan said. "Property." Draft opened one eye, yawned, and rolled his head away as if declining to dignify the legal theory. For a while, the town treated Draft like a legend trying to walk on four paws and a healing sprain. At the diner, someone left sausage wrapped in foil for him. At the feed store, the clerk who had sold Roan the orthopedic bed began keeping a box of large biscuits behind the counter. Wayne Calder claimed Draft had saved his sheep from becoming barbecue with hooves, which Judith corrected every time because she found the image disrespectful to both sheep and dinner. Paula Reyes simply crouched when she saw Draft, waited for him to approach, and scratched the side of his neck only after he allowed it. Draft accepted admiration with the grave burden of a king forced to greet villagers. He did not become friendly exactly. He became less opposed to the idea of people. There was a difference. A local reporter came 2 mornings after the state notice, driving a compact car that had no business on snowy ranch roads. She wanted a photograph of Draft in front of the Clear Basin sign, something symbolic, she said, something powerful, something readers could connect with. Roan stood beside his truck outside Eliza's clinic and looked at her until the reporter lowered her camera slightly. "He's done enough work for them," Roan said. Harlan, who had come along to give a statement and complain about the coffee in the waiting room, laughed so hard he coughed into his sleeve. Draft chose that exact moment to sit, lift his chin, and yawn with majestic boredom, looking for all the world like a royal judge dismissing the entire field of public relations. The reporter did get one photograph, not of the dog by a logo, of Draft sitting beside Roan's boot while Eliza adjusted his bandage. Harlan leaned on his cane grumbling, and Laurel stood in the background writing notes in her yellow field pad. It was not dramatic. No flames, no pointing arrows, no grand pose. Just a small circle of tired people and one dog who had survived being turned into paperwork. Roan did not hate that picture. He did not say so. But he did not ask her to delete it. That afternoon, Eliza closed the exam room door and reviewed Draft's recovery. "He'll heal," she said. Roan stood with his arms folded while Draft sat on the mat and avoided looking at the scale, possibly on principle. How well? Well enough to run if he forgets he's not supposed to, which he will because he is male, German Shepherd, and apparently employed by destiny. Roan glanced at Draft. "He resigns." "He should." Eliza slid a form across the counter. "No more industrial work, no heavy field duty. Short walks for now, then gradual strengthening. He can track smells in the yard if it makes him feel important." "It does." "I assumed." Roan looked at the form. "Adoption transfer." His name was already typed in one box, Draft's in another. It was just paper. 1 page, a few lines, signature at the bottom. Roan had signed documents before. Enlistment papers, medical releases, work orders, repair invoices, statements that described life and loss with insulting efficiency. He knew paper could lie. He knew paper could arrive late. He knew paper could dress a wound in clean grammar and pretend healing had happened. But this page did not pretend. It asked only whether he would take responsibility for the animal standing beside him. Draft leaned his shoulder lightly against Roan's leg, not because he needed balance this time, because he had chosen the contact. Roan signed. The pen felt heavier than it had any right to. Eliza took the form back and stamped it. "Congratulations, you are now officially supervised." Roan looked down at Draft. "I suspected as much." Draft's tail moved once, barely. A private verdict. Life did not transform after that. Roan did not wake the next morning as a man made whole by one brave dog and one good deed. Grief was not a machine that could be repaired with a replaced cable and a tightened bolt. It was more like old weather in the walls. Some days quiet, some days rattling every loose thing in the house. But the cabin changed in ways too small for anyone else to notice. A second bowl stayed by the stove. A leash hung beside Roan's canvas jacket. The orthopedic bed, once rejected as an insult, had become Draft's throne. Roan stopped leaving the porch light off at night. He told himself it was for the dog. The lie was gentle enough to let live. Harlan began coming by with coffee no one asked for and advice no one could stop. He sat at Rowan's table and complained about investigators who wanted him to explain root codes 3 times when the first explanation had been perfectly clear, in his opinion. He also brought a box of old fittings for Rowan to use on generator jobs, though he claimed he was only cleaning out his shed before the junk achieved legal residency. Once, while Harlan talked, Draft rested his head on the old man's boot. Harlan stopped mid-sentence. Rowan noticed the old technician's hand hover over Draft's head, uncertain and rough with longing. At last, Harlan scratched behind the torn ear. "Good worker," he said softly. Draft closed his eyes. Rowan looked away. Some things were too large to stare at directly. Laurel texted updates when she could, not gossip, not promises. Dates, requests, hearing times, document receipts, practical things. Roan answered them now, usually with 1 word, sometimes 2. Laurel never commented on the improvement, which was why it continued. Judith Calder sent pumpkin bread wrapped in a towel the color of late autumn. Roan opened the package, saw the handwritten note, and stood in his kitchen frowning as if kindness were a part he had not ordered. Draft sat beside him, nose lifted. "No." Draft's eyes moved to the bread. "No." The stare intensified. "You didn't save the county for baked goods?" Draft remained unmoved by philosophical distinctions. Roan gave him a crumb smaller than justice and larger than veterinary advice. A week later, Roan repaired the old generator at the volunteer fire station without sending an invoice. Chief Mercer told him the county had a maintenance budget. Roan said, "Use it for tires." Mercer studied him. "You allergic to thanks?" "Yes." "Too bad. Thanks." Roan left before the chief could make it worse. The first real thaw came on a quiet evening. Snow along the porch roof softened into droplets that fell one by one into the packed white below. The sound was gentle and persistent, like a clock learning mercy. Rowan sat at the kitchen table with his phone in his hand. Draft lay beneath it, head on his paws, no longer facing the door. The stove burned low. The voicemail from Caleb Rourke had waded through storms, through stolen files, through sawtooth rim, through adoption paperwork, through every small repair Roan had pretended was not part of him changing. He pressed play. Caleb's voice filled the cabin. It was older than Roan remembered. Rougher, but steady. "Rowan, it's Caleb. You don't have to call back if you don't want to talk about it. You don't have to explain anything. Just call so I know you're still there." That was all. No accusation, no sermon, no demand that the dead be spoken of before the living could breathe. Just a hand held out in the dark for years, not grabbing, not pulling, only waiting. Roan sat very still. Draft lifted his head and looked at him. The dog did not move closer, did not lean, did not perform comfort like a trained trick. He simply stayed. In that stillness, Roan understood something small and ruinous and holy. Presence was not the same as pressure. He replayed the message once. Then he called back before courage could leak out of him. The phone rang 4 times. On the 5th, Caleb answered. "Kessler?" Roan shut his eyes. The old name in that voice crossed years like a man stepping over a river in winter, testing each stone. "Yeah," Roan said. Silence, not empty, careful. Caleb exhaled once. "Good to hear you breathing." Roan looked down at Draft. The German shepherd had rested his chin on Rowan's boot. "I have a dog," Rowan said. It was not what he had planned. He had not planned anything. "A dog," Caleb repeated, and Rowan could hear the surprise, then the softness after it. "Name's Draft. That's a serious name. He's a serious dog." "Sounds like your type." Roan almost laughed. It came out as a breath. Draft's tail tapped the floor once. Roan swallowed. The cabin seemed to lean close, listening. "He doesn't quit," Roan said. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he answered, voice lighter and heavier at once, the way Dawn was both after a hard night. "Sounds like the man he's living with." Roan did not know what to do with that, so he did nothing. For once, nothing was enough. They did not speak about the mission, not that night. They did not say the names of the men who had not come home. They did not drag every ghost to the table and demand peace from them before sunset. Caleb asked where Roan was living. Roan told him Idaho. Caleb said that figured. Roan asked if Caleb still drank terrible gas station coffee. Caleb said only when he missed bad decisions. It was awkward. It was ordinary. It was miraculous in the plain clothing ordinary things wear when they are trying not to frighten broken men. The next morning rose clear. Roan stood on the porch with Draft beside him. The sky over the Idaho hills had turned pale gold, and every snowfield caught the light as if the world had been hammered from silver during the night. Far below, near Sawtooth Rim, small figures and utility vehicles marked the old lines. Not Clear Basin crews alone now. Inspectors, fire officials, people with maps who had been told at last to look carefully. The world was not fixed. Russell Brackett had not answered for everything. The investigation would be slow. Lawyers would fold words until they looked harmless. Some repairs would come late. Some apologies, if they came at all, would arrive wearing suits and measured language. The two men Roan had lost years ago would not walk out of the morning sun because Draft had found a leak beneath the snow. Nothing that mattered was that simple. But one danger had been found before it became a grave. One dog declared, finished by a company record, had been called by name. One man who had made exile into a religion had opened the door to another voice. Roan placed his hand on Draft's head. The German shepherd leaned into it, not heavily, not desperately, just enough to claim the contact. His torn ear warmed beneath Roan's palm. His eyes stayed on the valley, stern and watchful as ever, but his body rested close. Draft did not look at Roan as if he were a hero. That was good. Heroes stood alone in stories until the statue cracked. Draft looked at him as a member of the pack. For Roan Kessler, after years of living beyond the campfire of other people, that was greater than any medal. The porch boards creaked beneath them. Snowmelt fell from the roof in bright, steady drops. Somewhere in the valley an engine started, then settled into a safe and ordinary hum. Roan listened. For once the sound did not feel like waiting. It felt like mourning. Sometimes doing the right thing does not look grand. It looks like stopping for a wounded dog behind a warehouse. It looks like telling the truth slowly, carefully, even when powerful people hope silence will win. Draft did not save the day because he was perfect. He saved it because he never abandoned the warning he was trained to carry. And Roan found his way back, not by becoming fearless, but by finally letting others stand beside him. In our own lives, may we have the courage to notice what others overlook, to protect what cannot speak for itself, and to believe that even after loss, God can still place a faithful companion on the road home. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe stories like this still matter, please subscribe and walk with us into the next one. May peace find your home tonight, and may hope keep watch at your door.